He kept doing this to her all night until she died. Today, we're diving into a chilling case that left an entire community shaken. Before we begin, don't forget to support my channel by subscribing and turning on notifications. In one of the liveliest and most energetic cities, a tragedy unfolded that no one saw coming. Ayajan Yadalova, a bright young woman with ambitions as wide as the horizon, was robbed of her future in the most horrifying way. This cruel crime not only took her life, but also brought to light significant social issues like unchecked violence and an alarming lack of accountability within law enforcement. Ayajan's family was devastated, overwhelmed with grief, as they watched their desperate calls for help ignored by the authorities. Their world collapsed as they not only lost a beloved daughter and sister, but also began losing faith in the justice system they turned to for protection. The tragedy sent shockwaves through their lives and raised questions about how such cries for help could fall on deaf ears. Ayajan's friends, who remembered her for her infectious warmth and genuine kindness, were equally horrified, not just by her death, but by the brazen actions of the perpetrator, who continued to taunt the world with disturbing updates on social media even after being taken into custody. But let's go back to the beginning, to Ayajan's story, a story that soon became a powerful symbol of the fight for justice, a story that demands we reflect on the value of life and the failure of those meant to safeguard it. This heart-wrenching incident shook countless lives, forcing people to ask tough questions about the safeguards that should exist to prevent such horror. In Almaty, a city usually known for its peaceful rhythm, March 19th, 2021, will forever be remembered as a day of darkness. The discovery of remains scattered across various locations stunned the city, leaving its residents haunted by the magnitude of the violence that had occurred. Not long after these dreadful discoveries, Ayajan's family was confronted with the gut-wrenching task of undergoing a DNA test to confirm their worst fears, that the remains were those of their cherished 19-year-old daughter. The pain they endured was unimaginable. Behind every smile and happy memory, there lurked a silent storm waiting to tear their lives apart. Now, the city itself was gripped by a sense of dread, as an unseen force seemed to manipulate their once normal lives. On the eve of her tragic end, March 18th, Ayajan was living life with unbridled joy. She uploaded a video to TikTok, dancing, laughing, and radiating positivity to her audience, as she had done many times before. Her followers could feel the energy, the vibrancy, and the zest for life that defined her. She had big dreams of a successful career in design, and it seemed like everything was falling into place for her. Yet, there was another side to Ayajan's life, one far from the happy videos and the bright smiles. Unseen to most, her life had taken a darker turn. Secret meetings and unknown promises introduced her to someone who had far different intentions. While Ayajan was eager to step into a bright future, an insidious presence lurked in the shadows, quietly closing in on her. Little did she know, the stranger who had entered her world carried intentions that would shatter everything she held dear. That evening, as Ayajan's excitement began to fade, she had no way of knowing that her life was about to take a grim and unexpected turn. A diligent student in her 4th year at the Academy of Design and Fashion, Ayajan was known for her dedication and passion. She was the type of student who rarely missed a class, or always eager to learn more and fuel her creative ambitions. Even on days when others might have skipped school for a break, Ayajan showed up, her mind filled with dreams of a thriving career in fashion. That morning was no different. She attended her classes with her usual enthusiasm, her thoughts focused on the bright future she was building for herself. After school, she worked at a local nail salon as a manicurist, a job that not only gave her financial independence, but also allowed her to interact with a variety of people, helping her develop essential social and professional skills. Her love for creating things by hand started at a young age. She fondly remembered the first time she made a dress for her doll or crafted a small token of love for her mother. That childhood passion for sewing had now grown into a serious commitment to fashion, and Ayajan was more determined than ever to turn her talent into a successful career. However, as fate would have it, something sinister was quietly unfolding in the city, something no one could see coming. Just days before her disappearance, a strange tension seemed to hang in the air, leaving people unsettled, as if the city itself sensed that something was wrong. A chilling question: who would be the next to fall prey to this unseen threat? On the night of March 20th, 2021, Almaty was cloaked in anxiety as the search for 19-year-old Ayajan Yadalova began. Her sudden disappearance alarmed her family and friends, who immediately raised concerns when they noticed she was nowhere to be found. Ayajen was not the kind of person to simply vanish. Known for her sense of responsibility and dedication, she always fulfilled her commitment. The day before, March 19th, she had finished her shift at the nail salon and was in good spirits, satisfied with how the day had gone and excited about the connections she'd made. But as that evening unfolded, something went terribly wrong. The dormitory where Ayajen lived, just a short walk from the Academy of Design and Fashion, was usually full of life, with the sounds of friendly conversations and laughter filling the air. But on that night, the usual sense of comfort was absent. By the time the doors were locked at 11 p.m., Ayajen was missing. Moral Bakarov, the dorm supervisor, later revealed that Ayajen had never been one to stay out late or break curfew. When her friends noticed her absence, they became increasingly concerned and approached Moral for help. Together, they decided it was time to contact the authorities. However, the response they received from the police was dismissive. Wait it out, they were told. She'll come back when she's done having fun. As the hours dragged on with no sign of Ayajen, her family in Taldykorgan began to lose hope. Even her boyfriend was clueless about her whereabouts, heightening the urgency. Desperate, her family reached out to the police once more, pleading with them to take action and start searching for their beloved daughter. Ayajen's older sister, who was also living in Almaty, tried to report her missing, but she was met with apathy. The authorities, overwhelmed with the ongoing protests, told her they didn't have the manpower to investigate and suggested she wait it out. Despite their frustration, Ayajen's family refused to give up and tried again, only to face the same disinterest from law enforcement. Recognizing that they wouldn't be able to rely on the police, they sought help from local volunteers. Flyers with Ayajen's photo were soon plastered all over the city, and volunteers, fueled by hope and determination, organized search parties. They worked tirelessly, hoping against hope that they would find Ayajen alive and well. Reflecting on Ayajen's life leading up to her disappearance, it's clear that she was a young woman brimming with promise. After leaving her hometown of Taldykorgan, she had eagerly enrolled at the Academy of Design and Fashion, ready to pursue her dreams. Alongside her studies, she had taken up sewing custom-made clothing and had even launched her own online store, Allen. The business was doing well, giving her both financial independence and a creative outlet that she deeply cherished. Recently, her online shop had seen significant growth, with a surge in orders that filled her with excitement. She had big plans, dreams of expanding her brand beyond Kazakhstan and into international markets, particularly Turkey. To prepare for this, Ayajen had even started taking Turkish language classes. Despite the challenges of balancing work, studies, and her growing business, her teachers and peers were impressed by her unwavering dedication and her eagerness to learn. There was a spark in her eyes, a quiet determination that kept pushing her forward. Her part-time shifts at the nail salon typically ended around 9 p.m., and she always took extra care to leave her workspace clean and inviting for the next day's clients. Locking up the salon each night, the security footage provided a critical breakthrough in the investigation. It showed Ayajen entering the elevator of a tall residential building with an unidentified man. This footage rekindled a spark of hope that there might still be time to save her. Investigators quickly identified the man and tracked down his address. On the night of March 21st, around 10 p.m., officers arrived at the apartment of 28-year-old Rakhman Berdid Tarabekov. Despite being home, he refused to answer the door, heightening the suspicions of the police. After a brief debate, they decided to force entry. What they discovered inside was far more horrifying than they could have imagined. The apartment was a scene of utter brutality. Bloodstains smeared across the floor, walls, and furniture, with a dismembered body lying amidst the chaos. Even the most seasoned detectives were disturbed by the sheer savagery on display. At first, Tarabekov was nowhere to be found, having concealed himself within the apartment in an attempt to avoid capture. However, once he was located, he made a desperate attempt to end his life. Fortunately, first responders acted quickly, providing immediate medical attention until paramedics arrived. He was rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. While doctors worked to save his life, investigators combed through the apartment, gathering evidence and trying to piece together the events that had unfolded. At last, it seemed the person responsible for this heinous act would face justice. After several days in the hospital, once his condition had stabilized, Tarabekov was transferred to a detention facility. This step was essential not only for his own protection, but also to ensure the investigation could proceed without further complications. The public's attention on the case was intensifying by the day, and the authorities knew They had to move swiftly to avoid any missteps. With Tara Bekoff in custody, the police sealed off his apartment and launched an extensive forensic examination. The city's best crime scene investigators were brought in to analyze the evidence. What they uncovered shocked even the most experienced among them. The level of meticulousness in the crime was staggering. Inside the apartment, they found human remains meticulously stored: scalp, skin, teeth, and nails, each placed in separate plastic bags as though they were items in a gruesome collection. The scene was more than just a crime. It was a terrifying display of calculated madness, something so disturbing that it seemed torn from the pages of a horror novel. Even the most hardened officers were left speechless, recognizing that this wasn't just an act of violence, but a chilling expression of pure insanity. Inside the apartment, investigators made even more gruesome discoveries: dismembered body parts, including a skull. As the medical examiners would later reveal, Ayajan's head had been boiled for a long period, reducing it to nothing but bone. The chilling details were almost too much for even the most experienced detectives to bear, as the horrific nature of the crime continued to unfold before their eyes. As law enforcement officers searched for more clues and tried to understand the full scope of what had happened to Ayajan, they were faced with an even darker reality. In the days following her disappearance, additional parts of her body were found scattered across different locations in the city, dumped in trash bins, abandoned in basements, and left in other inconspicuous places. Each discovery further solidified the gruesome truth they were piecing together. What had begun as a missing persons case had quickly turned into a horrifying murder investigation. The family's last glimmer of hope, DNA testing to confirm the identity of the remains, was brutally extinguished when the results came back. It was official. The scattered remains belonged to Ayajan Yadalova. The weight of the loss was overwhelming, and the family was forced to confront a tragedy far more devastating than they could have imagined. Under questioning, the suspect, who had now been officially charged, provided a chilling recount of the events. He claimed that on the night of March 19th, during a heated argument around 11 p.m., he lost control and killed her. Panicked by what he had done and afraid of being caught, he made the calculated decision to dismember her body, attempting to erase any trace of his crime. That same night, he transported parts of her body to various locations across the city, abandoning them in a twisted effort to cover his track. When asked if he had any prior connection to Ayajan, the suspect insisted that they had none, though investigators remained skeptical. This denial left Ayajan's family with more questions than answers. They couldn't understand why someone would go to such lengths, pulling out her teeth, removing her skin, and meticulously cutting her nails, if his only goal was to hide the crime. Their confusion turned into suspicion as they began to wonder whether Ayajan had truly been his first victim. As the investigation dug deeper into the suspect's past, a troubling detail emerged. Rakhman Berdid Tarabekov had once been a student at a medical academy training to become a pharmacist, but had been expelled for poor academic performance. This revelation raised further suspicions that the mutilation of Ayajan's body could have been tied to some kind of medical or even commercial interest in human body parts. Forensic experts began investigating his digital footprint, scrutinizing his online interactions and social media conversations, especially with women. Fortunately, no evidence suggested harm to any other individuals, but the authorities continued to probe deeper into his life and actions. During the investigation, a new lead came to light: Tarabekov's communication with Ayajan through a dating platform. This chat, though initially innocent, was a disturbing link that further complicated the mystery surrounding the nature of their relationship and what had ultimately led to this horrific crime. When news of the investigation leaked online, rumors began to swirl, with many speculating that Ayajan might have entered into a relationship with her killer for financial reasons. These baseless assumptions fueled a flurry of conversations on social media, with people sharing various theories about the tragedy. Some pointed to the surveillance footage of Ayajan entering the elevator with the man, questioning her motives. However, her friends and those who knew her best were quick to defend her character, describing her as modest, respectful, and always careful in her dealings with men. Ayajan's family, aware of the hard work she had poured into building her online store and fashion brand, believed she had been deceived. They were convinced that Tarabekov had lured her to his apartment under the pretext of conducting business, perhaps to take measurements or place an order. The idea that such a cold and calculating individual could have set this kind of trap was deeply painful for them to accept. Her roommate, someone Ayajan had trusted and confided in, recalled unsettling conversations leading up to her disappearance. Ayajan had mentioned a man who expressed interest in purchasing her entire clothing collection. Although the prospect excited her, it also made her uneasy. She had always been cautious around new people and was hesitant to trust strangers, especially in business matters. Investigators concluded that Tara Bekoff had likely used this so-called business opportunity as a ploy to lure Ayajan into a deadly trap. Central to the investigation was the realization that Tara Bekoff had connected with Ayajan through a popular social media platform. He had posed as a potential customer, using his interest in her clothing line to gain her trust. Under the guise of discussing her brand, he convinced her to meet him at his apartment, where the horrific events unfolded. In the days following her murder, Ayajan's family endured unimaginable suffering. Waiting for her body to be released for burial was an agonizing experience, filled with uncertainty, fear, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Every day felt like an eternity as they searched for answers and grappled with the horror of what had happened to their beloved daughter. It wasn't until April 16, 2021, nearly a month after her death, that her body was finally returned to the family for the funeral. Ayajan was laid to rest in her hometown of Taldykorgan, where family, friends, and loved ones gathered to say their final goodbyes. The atmosphere at the funeral was heavy with grief, as those who had known her shared memories of her warm heart, kindness, and the vibrant energy that had touched so many lives. The investigation was plagued by rumors and gossip that tarnished Ayajan Yadalova's reputation, unfairly casting shadows on her character. However, investigators soon uncovered the truth through an analysis of the messages exchanged between her and Tara Bekoff. These exchanges made it clear that the accusations of her being involved in inappropriate behavior were completely false. Despite this, the public debate remained heated, with many refusing to believe that someone like Tara Bekoff could be capable of such heinous crime. His former teachers and classmates described him as quiet and reserved, the type of person who would never seem likely to commit such violence. Some believed he had been framed or caught in a misunderstanding. This created further friction in the community, with the divide between those who knew Ayajan as a bright and driven young woman and those who were hesitant to accept the truth about Tara Bekoff's dark side. The investigation was extensive, with law enforcement conducting numerous forensic analyses to gather every possible piece of evidence. Kadira Janalam Januli, the family's attorney, revealed in interviews that the case grew to over 30 volumes, involving more than 30 forensic examinations. The enormity of the investigation demanded intense efforts and resources from authorities. Despite the extensive work, psychiatric evaluations confirmed that Tara Bekoff was mentally stable at the time of the crime, fully aware of his actions. When the trial began, marking the final chapter of this heart-wrenching case, Ayajan's family sought the harshest punishment possible. They demanded justice, not only in the form of a maximum prison sentence, but also financial compensation for the emotional devastation they had endured, totaling 26 billion tenge. The court carefully reviewed every detail of the case and ultimately handed down a 25-year prison sentence to Tara Bekoff. While this was the maximum penalty allowed under the law, the court did not find sufficient grounds to impose a life sentence. The civil lawsuit was partially upheld, with compensation awarded to the family, though far less than what they had initially sought. Throughout the investigation and trial, the family's pain was compounded by the knowledge that the authorities had ignored their desperate pleas for help in the early days of Ayajan's disappearance. Their repeated requests for an immediate search were dismissed, leaving them in a state of helplessness as the crucial hours ticked away. Ayajan's brother, in an emotional interview, expressed his frustration with the police's failure to act swiftly, believing that these delays had cost them precious time that could have saved her life. As the perpetrator continued his brutal actions, seemingly unafraid of being caught, the family's hope of finding Ayajan alive slowly slipped away. The horror of realizing that she had been abandoned by the very people meant to protect her deepened their grief. A month after her tragic death, her family finally laid her to rest, burdened with the knowledge that they would never have the chance for a proper goodbye, forever haunted by the feeling that more could have been done. The sealed zinc coffin became a powerful and painful reminder of the family's profound sense of loss. Each of them longed for one last moment with Ayajan, to feel the warmth of her kindness and to see her radiant smile again. The reality that they would never experience her presence, her compassion, or her joy again filled their hearts with a deep bitterness and sorrow. They were left with a void that could never be filled, their grief compounded by regret and the feeling that more could have been done to save her. Meanwhile, the police refused to acknowledge any missteps, maintaining that they had followed all necessary procedures and acted promptly. However, The evidence suggested otherwise. The delays in launching the investigation only exacerbated the family's anguish, leaving them with countless unanswered questions. Ayajan's loved ones were left to wonder how their fears and pleas for help had been ignored when every moment was critical. This sense of being disregarded weighed heavily on them, adding to their already unbearable despair. It wasn't only Ayajan's family who felt this deep sense of frustration. Her friends, too, were engulfed by anger and disillusionment with the system that had failed to protect her. When investigators finally began collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses, they were met with a wave of unfounded rumors that sought to tarnish Ayajan's reputation. These baseless accusations, spread by those with ill intent, only deepened her family's pain. They knew the real Ayajan, kind, talented, and full of dreams. It was heartbreaking to watch her memory be tainted by false narrative. Every new detail that emerged from the investigation only intensified the family's grief, leaving them more isolated in their sorrow. The crime committed against Ayajan left a lasting scar not just on her family and close friends, but on the entire community. Her death became a symbol of a larger tragedy, one that exposed deep flaws. With profound sadness, Ayajan's brother spoke about his hopes for justice, voicing his belief in the law of karma. "I trust that every person who does wrong will eventually have to answer for their actions," he said, his words laced with both pain and conviction. Despite the unbearable grief that had befallen the family, he clung to the hope that justice, in some form, would be served. In the midst of their darkest moments, that small flame of hope still flickered, even as the world around them seemed filled with despair. The motives behind Terebekov's heinous crime remained unclear, but it was evident that he derived some twisted satisfaction from his actions. His trial became a symbol of the fight for justice, attracting widespread attention and sparking a wave of public outrage. Yet for Ayajan's family, no court ruling or public response could ever fill the void left by her brutal death. They were left grappling with the devastating reality that their beloved daughter and sister had been taken from them in the most horrific way. This case forced many to confront difficult questions about moral responsibility, the need for vigilance, and the importance of truly knowing the people around us. It served as a grim reminder that such a tragedy could strike anyone, and it highlighted the preciousness of every life. The crime against Ayajan was a stark wake-up call, underscoring the need for society to do more to prevent such horrors and to protect those most vulnerable. Her story should not be forgotten. It should inspire action, calling for stronger efforts to combat violence and safeguard women's rights. It urges us all to reflect on how we can contribute to making the world a safer, more just place for everyone.